Here we go then, part 3. This is the period of games that we'd sort of talk about as being the pivotal spell of the season. Norwich had a lot of the teams that were in and around them. It was the run where they played West Brom, Sheffield United, Leeds, of course, at Ellen Road. But it starts on New Year's Day at Brentford. Norwich, at this point, have quite a lot of injuries. I think Steepman was out, Leitner was out, Tetty was out. And we were really beginning to see what Chris sort of mentioned earlier with opportunities and players taking opportunities in this spell, I think.
Yeah, and this is where, if you're watching from afar, you think, right, is this where things are going to now come down? Late win at Blackburn, the 3-3 against Forest, which, as I say, without context, you think is, but really they should have won. Yeah, lose at home to Derby with the floodlights, missing Leitner, draw at Brentford, and you start to think, oh, okay, as most of us thought, okay, they go top around the Swansea game. Is this where things are going to level out? Look at all the games coming up. And I think we both said off camera, Chris, all saying at the time, if they get to the end of this run, say the Ipswich game, and they're 5th, 4th, anywhere around that, there's a chance of the playoffs. And obviously what happened was rather different in the end.
It was an incredible run. I would categorise this stage of the season as the point where I stopped worrying about the young players, because you had Closer and Hanley were both back fit for some of this point. Hanley certainly was, because he made a brief comeback in December. And when we went away to Blackburn, and Blackburn were going well at the time, in the back of my mind I thought, Godfrey at centre-back and Zimmerman, you've got Hanley, maybe now's the time to bring him in. I'll be honest and say I probably felt the same at Elland Road, thinking maybe today's the day to bring Hanley and Closer back in. The fact Daniel Farke never did it, and the fact that those players who played stood up to those occasions, and they were under a lot of pressure during a lot of those games, and particularly the West Brom one, and when they could have been 2-3-0 down in the first 20 minutes, and they managed to deal with it, and not just deal with it, but come through and get points and wins at places like Blackburn. That's when you started to think, do you know what, actually these young players are the real deal. I'm not going to worry about them anymore.
Can I ask you two guys a question? As Norwich fans, would you go as far as to say, for Daniel Farke football, that Ben Godfrey and Christoph Zimmerman are just better than Tim Closer and Grant Hanley for that style of football?
I would say.
Is that where you're headed with it?
I think, yes, because Ben Godfrey is a midfield player.
I saw him play for Shrewsbury midfield.
Ben Godfrey's a midfield player. In Ben Godfrey's mind, Ben Godfrey was a midfield player last summer. But I remember Daniel Farke saying, I don't exactly remember when it was, I've got an idea it might have been pre-season, where he played Godfrey at the back. And he said something along the lines of, Ben Godfrey will be a good midfielder, but he's got the potential to be a world-class defender. And we all sort of went, doesn't play in defence. And yet Daniel Farke has been proven to be absolutely right in terms of spotting that potential. Who knows what Ben Godfrey could achieve? But he spoke a couple of weeks ago, Godfrey, and admitted that he wasn't so sure about being a defender. And Daniel Farke had not talked him into it, but he'd shown the right attitude and grasped this opportunity, and he's been one of the finds of the season. Yeah,
I've heard Paul Hurst speak a couple of times about that Shrewsbury spell and about Ben Godfrey in particular, and say that he couldn't believe he was playing at centre back, that he only saw him as a midfielder. But I think when you
where's Paul Hurst now? Where's Daniel Farke?
Well, if you boil it down and you take his characteristics, you say, okay, he was sort of a technical midfielder in League One. The Championship is the step above that. If you actually move him back where he's got more space and he's got a clearer view of the pitch, that probably is a fairly logical decision. So that's probably something you boil down to good coaching.
A logical decision in terms of him having the ball, but how is he going to cope with Championship strikers?
And also, guys,
and he's done brilliant.
Financially, totally illogical, because Hanley and Closer is £13 million was spent on those two guys.
I know it's a theme I keep coming back to, but again, if I was a football manager, and if many other managers probably would have gone into some of those games and gone, actually, Grant, we need you today.
I've seen 5 years of Mick McCarthy. You know who he would have played.
And he would have done. And he may have got a decent point there and a clean sheet. But to have those options available to him with Daniel Farke, to have those options available to him, and yet still go, no, you're playing really well. You're in the team. What confidence that must give.
And to not have had pressure from above.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, you're depreciating this Swiss centre-back asset or whatever, but what's the upside of Godfrey?
Yeah, well, that's it. What confidence. And I'll just use that as a point as well to talk about Tim Krul, who we haven't mentioned much so far, and who did have his critics at times this season, and made a few mistakes. But the fact, Daniel Farke showed all season that it doesn't matter how many international caps you've got, what you've done in the Premier League, if I don't think you're playing well, if I think I've got a better option, I will leave you out. He never did it with Krul, and I think that speaks volumes for how important Tim Krul was to Norwich City season, actually.
It's something we've seen throughout his reign, really, because if you think even to his first season, I mean, Wes Hoolahan, Russell Martin didn't get too many games. I mean, they're two players that are Norwich through and through, and still they couldn't get into Daniel Farke's team. So him opting for younger players, I think, is probably an illustration of him as a coach, the fact that he does want to improve players and that he does believe in sort of this balance that you reference.
And in fairness,
that's so important for that.
In fairness, that's one of the tasks he was given when he took the job. It was, we want you to have a successful team, we want you to win games, but we need you to bring through young players, because Norwich hadn't done that so much in recent years. And
of course they needed to, because of the financial situation.
But I can understand why they hadn't, because they'd always been either battling relegation or pushing for promotion. And no manager who's under pressure takes that sort of gamble. So
Can I just quickly come in on the criticism of Krul? I think Championship fans sometimes forget where they are, and sometimes you hear them say, what do we need in January? We need a forward who can hold up the ball, who's under 25, who can finish. And you're like, okay, that's Romelu Lukaku and he'll cost you £70 million. This is the Championship, and you want a goalkeeper who's experienced, can see everyone through, make good saves, have intelligence, and play with his feet. Well, that's a £25 million Premier League goalkeeper. So I know the criticism was he was a bit hokey with the kicking, but it's the Championship, and what do you expect is all I would say.
If we take that spell from sort of the new year to the end of the season, I actually think Tim Krul was really good. The Brentford game, I remember he made an absolutely terrific save that probably ensured Norwich left with a point, didn't he? Because Brentford were really good that day.
Yeah, they were, and it was another game where you actually left feeling more confident about Norwich, because they'd come through a really difficult afternoon, and for long spells of that game they were 1-0 down, and looked as if that
you don't have the ball at Brentford much, do you?
No, you thought, well, I can't see us getting back into this one, and yet Tim Closer pops up with a header from a corner, and you get a draw, and you leave thinking, you know, and again, Norwich have done so many good things this season, and I don't think they've had enough credit for going through an entire Championship season and only losing 2 away games.
Yeah,
I think that
unbelievable.
is quite something.
Yeah. And if we take that Brentford game, did you say you were at that one?
No, I was not.
You weren't at that one. But if we take it, it was quite an uncharacteristic Norwich performance in the sense that they didn't have too much or as much of the ball as usual. They scored with a header from a corner. It was almost like them showing a different side to their game.
Exactly what they did at Forest. 2 headers from two corners from Closer. So I did a thing, one video, and it said adapt and thrive, and that's what Norwich did consistently. They always found a way to win. And I remember about your blowing teams away comment. If they didn't blow teams away, they found a way. They scored a header from a corner. They, a bit of brilliance from Buendia or whatever, Pookie goal, and they won by 1 goal.
And this was a run. Of course, Norwich went to West Brom away, and it was again about those players who didn't play so much taking opportunity. I think Jordan Rose scored a pivotal equaliser that day, which had West Brom won, they'd have gone above Norwich. So it's moments like that in the season you look back on, and like you say, it's good teams finding a way, isn't it?
From a Kenny McLean cross as well. After the Rhodes equaliser at West Brom, the two had just come on, and McLean crosses, and Rhodes turns it in. And we hadn't seen much of Kenny McLean at this point because of injury, but I know from speaking to people around the club, actually of all the players they signed last summer, he was the one they were most certain about. He was the one that many people here thought, we've seen what he's done in Scotland. He will take the Championship, and actually in the end he did. But that was like a new signing. And Norwich had a quiet January, didn't they? But him coming back to fitness and being able to feature again, you look at the season Leitner had and the season Vrancic had, and yet by the end of the season, McLean is keeping them both out of the team. So that speaks volumes for what a timely return to fitness that was for him.
And in this game in particular, that West Brom game, Norwich didn't have Steepman or Leitner, two protagonists that were pretty major to their style of play beforehand, and yet still left with a point. And that speaks volume about. We speak about the pretty football and the young side, but actually this squad has a lot of character.
Plenty of examples of toughness. And to your point, Chris, I've got this as the point where Farke nails his colour to the mast. He's got all of Closer, Godfrey, Zimmerman, because they'd all come in and out, and he's now. Yeah. Going to play. He's now going to play Godfrey and Zimmerman right the way through. And what are the odds? Your first Premier League game here next season, it might be those two starting that one. They might go right the way through.
The other thing I remember about the West Brom game is certainly once it got to 1-1, I spent the whole of the closing stages of that game desperately hoping that West Brom didn't bring Wes Houlihan on because he was there as a substitute, and I remember thinking, oh no, I know what football's like. If he comes on, he's going to have to do the not celebrate and all of that, and think they left him on the bench, and I was so pleased. And I wonder where the Wes was as well, actually.
So we transition after that West Brom game. We've got Sheffield United at home in that one. It was a 2-2 draw, very competitive game, I think. For you, was this the sign of the two best teams in the league playing each other?
Not like that. I didn't know. I didn't know at that point whether either of them would hold out, because Sheffield United have come from 6 years in League One, no parachute money, and a couple of clever loan signings. You think, when are West Brom and Middlesbrough going to bore us all and just shoot up and take them on? So I still didn't think, even though it was a top of the table clash, you still think these teams, the moment's there for them to seize. The money teams are kind of standing aside, but I think looking from the outside, that looked like a great game as well. Two front foot teams, 4 goals, and I mean, it's just a shame that the Mr. Socko celebration took all of the headlines, but that must have been a fab game.
And Chris, at the time there was a lot of sort of beef, I suppose you'd say, between the two sides, particularly between Wilder and Farke. That sort of felt like the point they both gained a mutual respect for each other during that game.
I feel like it's gradually gone away. They got wrong quite early on in Farke's reign, didn't they? When the Norwich team bus turned up late at Bramall Lane and Norwich went on to win the game. But I think as the two sides have gone on a fairly similar sort of path over the last couple of seasons, they cannot help but respect each other. And Ben's right, that was probably one of the best games of the season in terms of two sides being evenly matched and really slugging it out. And the point Ben made a little while ago about when you're in the Championship, you have to realise that the players you've got are going to be slightly flawed. Emi Buendia, who's been brilliant this season, gives away a penalty in that game.
And Zimmerman really gets caught for the second goal, doesn't he? But with Wilder, never take it personally. He's a ruffler of feathers, and you should take it as a compliment, because this was something that Ferguson and Mourinho were always good at. They wouldn't pick a fight with someone who might get the upper hand. If you notice, Wilder's all over Bamford and Leeds now, so that's shifted.
Yeah, I think, and that's it. I think with the Buendia point, it's funny how he gave away a couple of important penalties this season and got sent off, gave away some soft free kicks, but because he's an attacking player, Norwich fans are so much more forgiving and can see what he does going the right way, all the good things he does. Whereas,
absolutely.
Going back to what you're saying about Tim Krul, goalkeepers, defenders sometimes don't get that luxury, do they, when they make a mistake?
But that edge that he plays on almost makes him more exciting.
Yeah, what a player as well.
How does he rank in terms of what you've seen in the Championship?
Buendia, I've got him with Grealish and Hernandez.
That's your top three.
Well, I'm a bit biased always towards the creative players who can create a goal, and those three are very, very watchable. Obviously, you need your goal scorers, so Pukki and Sharp have been outstanding. There's some good deep line midfielders. Norwood, probably the pick, just because he gets a bit more licence to do more. The Norwich deep line midfielders have to play it short and play it quick, and Norwood gets to ping the balls about. But I did not expect Buendia to be in the same bracket as Grealish at the start of the season.
And every time you're talking about Hernandez, I'm in my mind.
I'm talking about Pablo.
I know you are, but I'm thinking of Onal. It's making me feel better.
Sorry.
And this is now the spell where Norwich are about to go to Elland Road, and there's a lot of angst around Spygate and a lot of people lending their weight into that. In terms of that game, just how seismic did it feel for Norwich's season going into it?
Yeah, it was a 5:30 kickoff, wasn't it? So the build-up felt really long, and I remember sitting there because we still went in there at 2 o'clock. So the build-up, and you sat there at Elland Road quite early, watching the ground fill up and fill up and fill up, and you're thinking, this is, to all intents and purposes, a Premier League fixture. This is massive. What happens here? And whichever team wins this is going to be in such a strong position. And to see Vrancic do what he did inside the opening, 5 or 6 minutes. And the effect it had on Leeds, what a moment. And then the Pukki goal that nobody was quite sure had gone in until, there was a good delay until Pukki started celebrating. And I think this is a massive turning point in the season in terms of everyone's feelings towards Norwich City, and even the fans within the club, the belief that suddenly appeared after that game.
You've seen so many Championship games this season. You were at Elland Road for this one. In terms of that performance by Norwich, how does it rank as the best you've seen this season in terms of a team performance?
Might even be the best team performance by anybody that I've seen. No, I've seen Leeds reach ridiculous levels, but just not as consistently. It was a brilliant performance. I remember saying in my vlog, this was like a 90s German international team just turning up and going, nope, this is what's going to happen. And they played slightly differently. They played it absolutely perfectly. Took the first chance from the free kick and did sit back a little bit, absorb. Okay, nice lucky bounce for the Pookie goal, but Buendia had literally got through. They were playing a lovely counter-attack system, and if you wrote down what we're going to do, right, we're going to take our first chance, we're going to shut the crowd up, we're going to sit back, we're going to absorb. Leeds didn't create big chances, we're going to then break away and score a second goal. We're then going to control the second half, oh, and by the way, we're going to break away and score a third goal as well. You could not execute an away performance that differently, and at that moment, I'm like, Norwich are going to go up. They're going to get promoted, and it was the first time we saw the hierarchy of the league. Sheffield United are going to go to Leeds and win and crystallise it in a few weeks' time, but where you're like, no, it's not West Brom, it's not Middlesbrough, it's Sheffield United and it's Norwich, and it's not going to be Leeds. And Leeds lost all those big games at home. It was a brilliant performance.
Yeah. You mentioned Spygate was very much in the news around that time, wasn't it? And Daniel Farke is not the sort of head coach who picks a fight, and he's always very kind and respectful with what he says publicly about other managers and other goings on in the league, because I think he knows that if you come out and say something, you're almost writing the opposition's team talk for them. But I got the impression that he was not particularly impressed that Bielsa had named his starting lineup 2 days before the game. I think Bielsa stood on the Thursday, didn't he, at his press conference and said, "This is the team I'm starting with." And I think within Norwich City, I think they saw that as a bit of red ragging from Leeds, and I think that might have just given them that 1 or 2% more in terms of determination to really go there and make a point.
They were streets ahead, though.
Yeah, they were. They
really good, really good.
My question leads into what you've just said there, because we speak so much about atmosphere at Elland Road and how difficult a place it is to go. I think we had the whole Welcome Norwich campaign as well, which I don't know if you've heard of, but
no.
Leeds fans were trying to. It was talk of them aggressively storming Norwich's team bus. So Norwich came in through a different entrance through the home end.
No time for that whatsoever.
It almost felt like instead of sort of drowning in that atmosphere, they actually sort of puffed their chests out and we're going to use this to motivate us.
They really did, and everything went for them perfectly. So we don't know another outcome if it had gone 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but I can only comment on what I saw, and they totally nailed it.
It's the closest thing I've seen to the playoff final win over Middlesbrough since. Yeah. And I know it's funny how we've spent so much time this season and during this talking about how much Norwich have changed since then, and Alex Neil's gone and the club's revolutionised. Actually, that performance, the way they just grasped the occasion, embraced it, enjoyed it, took it by the scruff of the neck from early. I thought that those two games were very similar.
Such a young side as well.
Exactly, yeah.
And
they were comfortable. That even when they were defending, they were comfortable for that whole game.
And we talk about how good Marcelo Bielsa is as a coach. He almost got outdone by Daniel Farke in terms of tactically, I'd probably say.
Possibly. I think we've got...
Or was it more a case that Daniel Farke set up to nullify Bielsa's...
I think we've got
approach?
3 very, very good managers we've had this season, and I think they all actually did a very, very good job. I think what you see with Norwich beating Leeds there is the whole thing of Norwich and the whole setup. I think they've got better players, better pattern of play, and I think that's been borne out with how the season's ended, with one team going one way, one team going the other. I wouldn't, Bielsa has one tactic and it is glorious when it works. It's utterly fantastic, but they fucking knew what to do.
Is this the beginning of when we start to see Leeds' demise is probably the wrong word to use, but the fact where they start to burn out slightly, or
not necessarily burnout, but inability to win big games, and also inability to not lose when you have a bad game. Sheffield United, when they had a bad game, they still drew. Norwich, how many times did Norwich lose this year? Once at Preston?
Yes, in 2019.
So they have a bad game, they're going to draw. Do you know what I mean? Whereas Leeds, what did you say, they lost 9 games or whatever. So this was the start of, and I don't think we should criticise Leeds, because I think he's actually done a very, very good job. He's
got more out of those players.
Absolutely, this is Luke Ayling we're talking about, and Jack Harrison and whoever. But I do think this was the start of us seeing the future a little bit. Yeah.
And Chris, that seemed to be the night that a dream really became reality, didn't it?
I think it absolutely was. I think I remember the atmosphere in the away end afterwards, speaking to fans who were at the game, how much they enjoyed it, how much it felt like Norwich were embracing the opportunity that they had. They weren't going to turn up at these places like Leeds and shy away from the opportunity. They were going to actually enjoy it and grasp it, and that's been such a big thing this season.
That's the narrative, seizing the moment.
Yeah, and enjoying it.
Everything they've done this year in terms of players coming in, seize the moment. In terms of other bigger spending rivals, stepping back, seize the moment. Turn up at Leeds, seize the moment. They've done that. They've done that over and again.
Just the relish they had for it, I think, has been great this season. I think of course, the comparisons are drawn between Jurgen Klopp and Daniel Farke because of the Dortmund and the German links, but the way that Jurgen Klopp seemed to got his side this season to enjoy everything they were doing and relish trying to battle for the Premier League and the Champions League, and we've seen signs of that at Norwich as well.
That was a fantastic win. Ben, we've got you here, so we can't skip past that East Anglia derby at Carrow Road, I'm afraid. I think the way I saw that game was Ipswich probably in top gear and Norwich probably in third or fourth.
Yeah, we played quite well actually, strangely.
Between the boxes, I thought Ipswich were...
Ipswich actually played quite well. That's the weird thing. But just the story of their season was either penalty box, can't finish, can't defend, and obviously a goal after 60 seconds or what. I say Ipswich played quite well. They played a diamond midfield, and Max Aarons within 1 minute has the entire freedom of Norwich to run down the right wing. It's like, have you guys seen Max Aarons play before? You knew this was going to happen, but they had a plan to set up and stop the goal kicks, which worked quite well. But it was a very good side against a not very good side, and in the end they picked them off. It's
interesting you say that, a golfing quality. I've got written down here, which I think it was. And of course we had the narrative of Paul Lambert coming back, which seems to have sort of overshadowed that game generally. But in terms of Norwich, they were clinical that day.
Yeah, I mean, I've on Paul Lambert, I think he'll, despite what's happened since, he's always going to have a special place in my heart because of what he did here. It was that you can never take that away from us and what we went through with him together.
Absolutely. It
was absolutely fantastic. So I was quite sad seeing him grappling with stewards and police on the side of the pitch at Carrow Road. But I will say that on the day that he took the Ipswich job, I happened to be here at Carrow Road that night doing a Norwich City social club event, and we had a quiz against a team of Ipswich fans, and Terry Butcher was on the team. And I remember sitting down and talking to Terry Butcher afterwards and saying to him, actually, you've got Paul Lambert now, you're going to be absolutely fine. We have such belief in what Paul Lambert will do. He'll turn it round and you'll be absolutely fine. And we've had our fun with Ipswich struggling, but you've got the man now. And Terry Butcher saying he wasn't so sure because the problems go very deep at the football club. And it's only really from that night onwards, talking to Terry Butcher, that I probably got an appreciation for how much trouble Ipswich were in, and the fact that Paul Lambert couldn't turn them round. I know he's not done particularly well elsewhere, but from a Norwich City fan to see Paul Lambert not turn a team round, that's a real shock still.
Does that say more about Ipswich than it does about Paul Lambert? Would it have been the case that any manager have gone in there?
I would have thought so. Yeah, it's a very, very, very broken club, and the proof's in the pudding next season. One thing I am a bit upset with Norwich fans about, though, is the revisionist history on Lambert and discrediting things that he'd done.
That was always going to happen, though, wasn't it? As soon as he took this job. No, it shouldn't, but it was always going to.
Should it? Norwich fans need to understand that the way the Premier League money has gone up, they would not be, with that double unlikely promotion, they would not be here in the Premier League next year if it wasn't Paul Lambert taking them through, hitting the Premier League right at the time when the parachute money doubled. And I do get a bit upset. Okay, Lambert might not be as good as he was when he was at Norwich, but he needs to be respected for a titanic job and a hugely, talk about seizing the moment, hugely unlikely promotion that has literally, if you get in the Premier League, it's then parachutes for a couple more years and then you might be able to bounce back, literally setting up a whole start of the decade. And it's very ironic that and now Ipswich manager setting Norwich up.
And I think that's the only thing that Paul Lambert has done wrong, really, in Norwich fans' eyes, is he's gone and managed Ipswich, and that sort of ruined it, really, because Norwich fans can't bring themselves to like anyone.
But Chris, he shouldn't be discredited.
No, he shouldn't. He absolutely shouldn't, because people have often said the season Norwich have just had is at the best one I've ever commentated on. It's right up there. I think it's a toss-up between that one and the Lambert season in the Championship. This one's the most recent, so you're still full of beans and thinking how brilliant it was. But going straight from League One right through the division up again, what a ride that was. And I'll always remember it, and I've made myself look very silly the last couple of years, telling Stoke fans they'll definitely be all right because Lambert has gone in, and now saying the same things to Ipswich fans.
No, keep saying it.
You've got this. I've because of what I saw here for 2 or 3 seasons, I've just got this unerring belief in Paul Lambert, and it's only now that it's starting to go away a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I was going to ask you a very quick question on Paul Lambert generally, because I think the perception outside, and particularly in these quarters for obvious reasons, is that actually he hasn't turned Ipswich around. He's not doing a particularly good job. So are you surprised that Ipswich have stuck with him? Because it's what he's done there is a lot deeper, isn't it, than just the results on the pitch, which is important to the supporters.
There's 2 different things there. I'm not surprised that they've stuck with him, because who on earth are they going to get who's any better?
Are you surprised he's stuck with them then?
I don't want to hedge my bets, but you're going to have to ask me at the end of next season, because to inherit a mess, and whatever you think of McCarthy, wherever he leaves, there is not long-term planning, and there is normally a mess and normally a relegation. And then for Paul Hurst to bring in a load of players, and then Lambert to come in between transfer windows. And yeah, I know people point to, there was 30 games left or whatever, but like Chris said, I think there's, you're looking at a very, very surface issue there. I
thought he'd do better. I really thought. Well, did he get 4 wins in the end? Didn't he? I thought 4 wins.
Won 4 games all season. Hurst got one of them.
Yeah.
5 all season.
Maybe I thought it was 5 because they got the leads on the
Oh,
last
of course,
day.
yeah. So Lambert got 4 wins.
He got 4 wins, and I have to say I thought he would do much better than that. So I can understand why it's happened, but I'm surprised that he's still so well thought of by Ipswich fans. But then it shows
but to put it into context.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's where we are as a club.
I think that's it. I think you never get, unless you support a team. It's why I'm always. You see Brighton getting criticised for sacking Chris Hughton, and we had the same thing here. I think unless you support a team,
absolutely,
you never quite understand what's going on.
Absolutely. I think that just draws an end to this part of episode 3 of the review. Thank you again to Chris and Ben for joining me. That was a good discussion there of what was a really pivotal point of Norwich's season, I think. And we're going to talk about the Preston and Bolton games in the next part, as well as that end of the season, which saw Norwich crowned champions. So do join us for that one. If you like this one, then leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, and we'll see you for part 3 very, very soon.